Hello there, it's Tom and Magnolia here, and this is the first of the Gunnerkrigg Court side stories, Annie in the Forest Part 1.
Hello there.
So this is the first of a series of smaller stories that don't fit into the main story of Gunnerkrigg Court, that I wanted to work on, and specifically in black and white. And once I've done enough of them, I'd like to gather them together into a sort of companion book called Beyond the Walls.
I'm looking forward to this because there's a lot of new elements introduced in this story that I think there's going to be a lot to talk about.
Yeah, when I was writing the Annie in the Forest comics, specifically, I did want to have some extra information that wasn't super important to the main plot of the story, but did develop a bit more of the world that they live in, and, you know, especially outside of the court. And that's why I wanted to focus directly on Annie for these first two side stories. The rest of the side stories will not be so directly linked to the main plot, but I thought showing what happened to Annie when she left the court for the summer would be kind of an interesting way of jumping into that kind of material. None of these stories are going to be required reading, and I kind of liked that when Annie went off into the forest for the summer, we didn't really get a sense of what she got up to other than the hints dropped in the main story and the way that she was different when Kat returned.
I guess this was sort of a turning point for her character in some ways.
Yeah, it was the first time really that she was experiencing anything outside of the court for an extended period of time since she'd gotten there. But right here at the beginning, the first page is just a very quick recap of kind of the circumstances that led to Annie staying here in the court. And it's basically a little synopsis of what happened in the previous chapter. And the last panel here is a version of the last page of book 3. And we get a view of what Annie sees when she enters into the village.
I think what I really like about this, and what I wanted to ask you about, is this one shot of them in their town, of the tree elves in their town. I think when I read the chapter where she was, you know, parting the leaves to see what lay ahead of her, I was imagining something a lot more magical and mystical, like, I don't know, the Na'vi or something. What was your inspiration for making them more, provincial, I guess?
Yeah, I wanted to stay away from them having some sort of fantasy, magical wonderland, hidden away here in the forest. I just wanted them to seem like just a bunch of people just living kind of regular lives, you know, in their own little hideaway here. And the first thing that Annie comes across is just, say, a few people milling around in the market, and then realizing that somebody has come that they're not really familiar with. And really the whole point of what we'll see throughout this story is that Annie is basically intruding in their lives, and in the same way that their lives are not anything particularly special, they are also not really treating her as anything particularly special. In fact, in some instances, she's kind of treated as an inconvenience, just kind of inserting herself into the life. And that's partly down to the decision that she's made to just stay here in the forest, despite that causing a lot of people to worry about her. And so that's something that we brought up a couple times. And I wanted to have that as a point of introspection for Annie, for her to realize that she is kind of just inconveniencing people. And it's one of the times where I tried to show that the decisions she'd make do affect the people around her. But as for the lives that these tree elves are living, I kind of wanted it to seem not particularly modern, but not, you know, Stone Age living, where they're kind of living in caves or have no kind of technology at their disposal. I wanted their village to just seem like a countryside village that you might find in the UK, perhaps back at the start of the early agricultural days.
I really love Kepi's design, by the way. I think she's really cool. But one thing that I really like about this story is that to me at least, it feels very real, like a story about when you're younger and have to go stay with like your parents' friends or something, and the kind of, it's both uncomfortable and kind of weirdly comfortable at the same time. Was there anything specific that inspired this story?
Well, mainly I thought it was a nice and interesting situation to put Annie in. Unlike the court, where the kids are basically left to their own designs and they live in isolation, essentially. Here, she's surrounded by people, and they're talking to her and touching her and grabbing her, and kind of she's very much thrust straight into that, which would kind of make her feel uncomfortable. And I did want it to seem uncomfortable because, like, right from the start, Kepi indicates that she's kind of inconvenienced by having another mouth to feed here, and it's very clear that the only reason why they would be doing this is because basically it's Coyote's mandate, you know, and they know better than to go against what he's saying. So now they are all in the situation where they have to look after this extra child.
But I love that Kepi has kindness to her as well. She's not, it makes her feel like a very honest character. Like if she says something nice, it's because it's what she's thinking, because she'll say otherwise if she doesn't.
Yeah, for Kepi, I wanted her to seem very motherly, but in the sense that you kind of get the idea that she can be very strict or very kind. And I think that's probably why Coyote picked her to look after Annie. Other than the fact that they're probably one of the larger families in the village, I think he would know instinctively that Kepi is probably a good person to thrust Annie into, because while she will be protective and look after Annie, since, in the same way that she's looked after her 5 kids, she will also, I guess, not spare the rod, as it were, and the first thing she does, as we'll see in a minute, is put Annie to work cleaning the place, and she doesn't hesitate to kind of hold back.
And here we see the structure of the house. Do you want to talk about how you designed that?
Yeah, we'll see later on that the tree elves have the ability to sort of move wood and move the trees and sort of meld them into different things. But in the same sense that I didn't want their society to be some sort of magical fairy wonderland, I wanted to show that while they can manipulate things using magic and stuff, their buildings do still seem very artificial and man-made, and they're made to be comfortable, and they've used what's around them to make themselves comfortable, really, and they've used what's available to them, but not in the sense that they're beholden to, say, the whims of nature, and that they're perfectly at one with their environment and stuff like that. Stuff that I would have seen in, I guess, other scenarios like this in other stories. I wanted to show that they're more than capable of basically shaping their environment around themselves, for their own purposes.
I remember you telling me about this page. You wanted to show that Kepi's pretty strong.
Yeah, all the tree elves, they look very human and very humanoid, but I wanted it to be clear that they probably have very different physical capabilities to humans. Here we see the kids are jumping straight up into their house here. Like, it's way higher than any human could ever jump. And even Kepi, she reveals that she's heavily pregnant, which, it might not have been apparent at first because she's kind of a large woman anyway. But despite being pregnant and needing help to get up to the entrance of the house, she's still able to pull herself up with a single arm, like in the last stretch there. So she's while she's like diminished in her capacity, she's still probably far stronger than, say, even a regular human would be. And I just thought that was just a small detail that I found interesting, and that helped me kind of design their houses and the environment that they're living in. But like everything else, it's not a special attribute that they have. It's just part of who they are.
Sure. But this panel here, I think this is the first time that we've seen Annie actually show interest or attraction to another character. Like, outwardly, anyway.
She's not showing interest or attraction here.
She's blushing and looking at him. That means she loves him.
Yeah, probably because she's a little bit embarrassed about having to be pulled up into a house by some cute boy.
No, blush lines mean you're in love.
Oh, well, we'll have to see. We'll see how that goes.
I just want to say I love this part too, because as an adult, I think it's a great move to invite a kid in your house and be like, all right, you got to clean if you want to eat with us. But I definitely remember like that sort of bratty feeling of injustice when you were a kid. So I just think it's great.
Yeah, this is kind of pitting Annie almost in a very bad light to the kids. Like, the first thing that Annie's entrance into their house has caused is that they now have to go and clean the house, So that's almost putting Annie like on a bad footing with them all. But I thought that was kind of fun to do and show that while Annie's accepted into their life, that also comes with good things and bad things, if she's going to be living with them basically, free room and board, then she's going to have to pull her weight around there.
And it also definitely seems like Annie has pretty much never been made to clean up after herself before. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. she won't be used to any of that.
She needs to get moving on that.
Well, exactly, yeah. So, and this just gave me an opportunity to draw just a big splash page like this. And I guess this is a good time to talk about one of the reasons of why I worked on these stories. Because these are posted online as single complete stories, and then collected into, like, I do limited run print versions of these as well. I didn't have to worry about pacing the pages update by update, and so I felt I had more freedom to either spend longer decompressing the story a bit or spend longer just on illustrative pages like this one, where it's not really pushing the plot forward, it's just giving me an opportunity to just draw a scene like this. And I wanted to do these in black and white because I do really love black and white comics when they're done well, and I wanted to try and push my artwork to the point where I would feel that the art would stand alone without using colors. And I mean, this is one of the first ones that I was doing, so I was really trying to learn a lot of new things here, and I'm still trying to come to grips with working in black and white, because I do feel it is very different to working on artwork that is eventually to be colored.
Well, I think it works really well, especially in this story, because it is a kind of a summer holiday story, and the black and white helps it feel very open and spacious and clear, and that's kind of how summer days feel to me. So I think adding color to this one would diminish that effect.
Well, working in black and white did make the story feel very separate to the main story. And so while it is all canon, it seems like it's happening at a different time, in a different place, and I kind of like that feel. One of the things that I'd like to get better at is tonal use in black and white work, and I think Japanese comics do that really well. And I was drawing this in Clip Studio rather than Photoshop like the main story, and trying to come to grips with that. For the sake of the online pages, I did put some texture on the grey, just so it wasn't just vast expanses of flat grey, but the printed versions don't have that texture on it, they just have the plain tones, which is something that I wanted to try and get to grips with.
And I really love this scene, this whole sequence, but do you want to talk a little bit about what kind of tone you were trying to strike with it, or anything like that?
Sure, yeah. Well, Annie she's thinking about the people that she's left in the court and thinking about her situation, and I guess feeling sorry for herself. I wanted a scene that kind of shows that she is in a sort of uncomfortable situation, and having this guy Camryn just come into her room in the middle of the night I wanted that to seem kind of uncomfortable, and Annie's not really sure about what's going to happen, just like the reader wouldn't be. And he's just kind of being very familiar and coming in, and he's noticed along this way that this brand that she has on her arm has kind of been distracting her. And he's coming in here pretty innocently, I guess, to just come and let her know that he's noticed that she's been very distracted and like trying to help her out and such. But I wanted the situation to be kind of, I guess, sort of romantic, but also kind of uncomfortable. Not threatening, but just very much outside of Annie's comfort zone, well, and leaving her not really sure how to feel about it.
I didn't find it uncomfortable at all. I thought it was really sweet, although I understand that Annie probably did.
Yeah. I think a situation like this outside of fiction would probably be extremely uncomfortable, you know. And so the next day, Jones has come along, and she's just delivering a bag of clothes and supplies for Annie, since she pretty much just left the forest without any preparation. And she's also bringing an update of what the people are thinking back in the court. And we also get to see one of the instances of where Annie is kind of getting a bit bratty and like feeling sorry for herself. She's clearly trying to elicit some sympathy from Jones, who's probably the worst person to try and do that from.
I love her complaining about the chores. It's so...
Yeah, like, I mean, Jones is having none of it, you know, and I think quite rightly so, you know, it's...
Of course.
Like, Kat maybe would have tried to make her feel comfortable, or she would have felt sorry for her, but, like, it's really something that she should not be coddled for. You know?
Yeah, that would have made me mad at Kat. Like, no, Annie, do the chores. It's fine.
Yeah. And so Jones is here to just very bluntly say that everybody's very upset at what she's done. And even that Kat's gone away on holiday. And we will see, like, the result of that when Annie returns from the forest in chapter 32.
I know that Jones is not really supposed to have emotion, but she definitely seems kind of mad at Annie to me. Do you think that she is, or it's just projection?
It's supposed to be projection, yeah. She's not mad at her. She has no feelings other way, but she also understands that she has no obligation to either make Annie feel better or try and fix the situation Annie's gotten herself into. So I think Annie understands that she's done something wrong, and so Annie and the readers should, like, hopefully would feel that Jones is angry at them, you know? Mm-hmm. And here, I guess I wish I could have made things a bit clearer. The younger kids are sort of here taking a lesson from this person here who's showing that they're able to manipulate the wood and make structures out of them. And we'll see that much more clearer in the second part. And it is very much just a background detail. Up to this point, we've seen that the structures are made of trees that are sort of grown into themselves somehow, and here's just a small indication as to how that would have happened. But it is also a chance for some good old-fashioned cattiness between Annie and one of the girls and her friends that she's living with.
I was just really crushed when I reread this page, because Annie's reaction, well, she has no reaction, but you know how much this would hurt her, you know, even if she would never say it.
Yeah, I mean, what's she supposed to do other than just sit there and take it, really?
Yeah.
And so in the next scene, Annie's sitting on her own and Camryn comes along. And I guess I wanted to talk about the way that the tree elves are written. And normally I really dislike it in stories when a character's accent is conveyed phonetically through the way that they're speaking. And while I tried to avoid that with the tree elves, I did want them to speak in a distinctive way that I guess would manifest as an accent if you were speaking. And I don't think I did too good a job of that. I think I should have probably dialed back a little bit. I think when it comes to dialogue, because compared to prose, when the dialogue on a comic page, a little goes a very long way. And I think the same goes for if you're trying to show any sort of speech inflection or different in what would be the reader's mind as just the basic speech pattern, if you know what I mean. So while Annie and any other character in the story would just be talking in regular English, I suppose, whoever is reading it, they will probably take on the accent that they are most used to, and so sometimes I like to point out that maybe Kat has a bit of a Scottish accent, but that's not really reflected in the way she speaks. I tried to do something a little different with the tree elves and have them use different words and speak in a way that I guess you wouldn't speak if you're just talking regular English. And I'm not sure how successful that was.
It came across to me.
Yeah, I think it came across, but reading it again, I definitely feel like I probably should have dialed it back a little bit. but yeah, it's just another thing that I was just experimenting with.
Well, I like how Annie picks up on it too. I think that's very real.
So this scene is just Camryn kind of extending a hand in friendship and letting Annie know that she's not alone here and it's not everybody dislikes her. He's just kind of trying to be friendly to her.
Sure, but he's doing it in a way that's very easily misinterpreted as romantic, I think.
Well, it could be that Annie, who's not really used to this sort of situation, kind of misinterprets it that way a little bit, perhaps.
Well, for real, though, this really is kind of the first time that subject is even broached with Annie in a way where she's not immediately denying it or pushing it away. So, do you think him not being, fully human or separate from the court had to do with that? Like, she's maybe able to accept it a little bit more that way? Possibly. And there is a little bit of Annie kind of being away on vacation, and sometimes people, when they go on vacation, they use it as an excuse to act a bit differently, or let their inhibitions go and that kind of thing. And so Annie kind of just going with the flow of things and, reacting differently to Camryn than she might to, anybody else in the court. I kind of wanted it to be a little bit of that too. Was it kind of fun to let her hair down that way? Sure, yeah. And the way that Camryn is acting, we'll see in the next part that he probably does come across as a little bit too friendly. But he doesn't mean to, really. But he doesn't really mean to, yeah. But Annie goes from one extreme to another. She goes from somebody who's very friendly and outward to her best mate, Camryn here. And this was just a fun picture of Camryn to draw where I could just focus on him and work a little bit on my cross-hatching and a bit of the detail on his arm and stuff. And this is probably one of my favourite pictures of a Camryn. And I don't think it would work very well as if it was coloured. I'm sure a better artist than me would be able to make a coloured version of this scene, but I kind of like how it is, just in black and white. And so they talk a little bit about Jones. And again, Annie tries to feel sorry for herself and elicits some sympathy from a Camryn, but kind of like Jones, Camryn is definitely not having it, and he's saying outright, look, you've intruded into their lives, and there's no way that me or Coyote are going to help you make the situation any better for yourself. It's something that you've done. Well, when I reread this scene this morning, preparing to do the video, I was really, really struck by just that one panel of Annie saying, would it be okay for you or Coyote to have a war with them? Because I don't think she realizes kind of how bad that is, because she's basically asking them to threaten anyone to get in line, even if she's not meaning to do that. And I hope that now she would be more self-aware about that kind of thing. Yeah, that's exactly what she's doing. She may not realize the weight of it, but at least Camryn understands that it's a completely unreasonable request, and he's certainly not here to coddle Annie or help her out of the situation that she's put herself in. But once it's clear that Camryn is going to offer no sympathy, really, they move on from that subject. And it's nice to see Annie indulging in a bit of fantasy here. Well, that is what she's doing. She's kind of dramatizing the little interaction that she had the previous night. And this little fantasy of hers was reflected later in the main comic as something that Zimmy saw in her mind in Divine. What chapter was that? That's right. That was chapter 38. But Annie goes off to this jumpers pool that Camryn told them about, and it's sort of a hangout spot, where the kids go and splash around, I guess. Again, something very different to what Annie would experience in the court. If you're a bunch of people swimming around and half naked, I guess, is not something that you would really experience in the court in the same way. But it did lead up to Annie getting semi-rude awakening with Camryn having brought his girlfriend along. She's really cute, by the way. I love her design.
Yeah, Ariel is just a regular girl, I suppose. She's, I wanted her to be cute, but not beautiful, like a supermodel.
She's cute.
No, she's cute, but, not classically beautiful, I guess, if that makes sense. And really, this whole situation is like, the end of the story is... Turns out the boy has a girlfriend, it's like a completely inconsequential drama, And again, I think doing that in a side story is a good place for it, It's not the sort of drama that I would have in the main comic. And I think this is probably a good place for it.
Sure.
And that is how it ends. And so we'll have to see the conclusion to that situation in the next side story, which is, of course, Annie in the Forest Part 2. And we'll go over that in the next video. So we'll see you then.
Bye!